More and more every year. So there you go.
I'm going to funnel people up this way because they may make the same judgment.
Yeah, taking up those stairs with them.
I just decided I need to say to people, I'm sorry, I can't do stairs. So figure it out another way.
Wonderful job this morning, by the way.
Thank you very much. Those two presentations are two of my favorites. Sometimes people hear about the hierarchy of need and we think to calm down and say, oh, so when everybody doesn't fill in a place card, it doesn't mean I'm a better failure. But
Please don't take it personally. We've got a long drive ahead of us, so I have to leave here by about 2:30. It's nothing against you, but
I understand.
Where are you from?
Belvedere by Rockford.
Yeah.
And then they dropped me off halfway because I live in a totally different direction.
Well,
So they go further up to go back to Belvedere, and I go up, because I live maybe 10 minutes from Gurney Mills Mall. So, I mean, I got another hour ahead of me, so it's like, so our rector's with us, and she's like, okay guys, tell me what you're with, you gotta remember this, she's got a preach tonight. So she's like, we gotta leave, don't leave at 2:30.
who's your rector?
Joyce.
Joyce, yeah, sure.
So,
Well, and for people who don't have to leave about that time, this last session that they've got scheduled for an hour and 15 minutes, I think we can cover in about 30. We really want to. Because it's mostly homework.
So does she do what she was talking about at your church, putting names on footsteps?
no. We're lucky, like, 'cause we have 2 services, and I went to the second one because my husband plays kite working. So we're lucky if we get 20 people.
But I mean, in terms of putting up names,
We don't do
pledge.
Well, I know the St. Michael's congregation where she did it. And I started working with them along about 1994 or 5. So they've had some years to build up to that.
I mean, we're very.
Our list of pledge, people who pledge, is completely secret. Not just numbers, but the names themselves are not disclosed as to who is pledging it.
Well, one of my requirements at Bay City is that I get to see the list.
Right.
Clergy gets to see the list.
With numbers.
Oh, yeah. You know, I have, what I have is a predominantly blue-collar congregation of faithful people, lots of fixed income, lots of health issues going on. What a smart priest looks for in that are changes. When somebody who's, let's say, been a faithful giver for a period of years, all of a sudden something changes, less means there's trouble, more means something really good might happen. But you're looking for the change that might indicate something pastoral that they haven't seen fit to tell you, that you might want to pray about on your behalf, that there might be trouble and you might want to go and have a chat and see what's going on. My best story about that comes from retired Bishop Burrell, who a young couple had sort of stopped giving and giving all. And so he went to visit them, and what he found out was that through some major unexpected health costs, they were behind on everything. They were getting ready to lose their house. And so he got their permission to bring in somebody from the congregation who was pretty good at financial management, who had enough professional credibility to intercede with the bank. and walk them through a refinancing program. People got involved in trying to help them sort out a job. In other words, you saved their house and helped them figure out their life and put it back together. And the only way he knew there was anything going on had to do with watching a video back.
Really?
Yes. So it's a good idea to sort of pay some attention. You don't obsess about it. Anybody who's ever counted cleared out the offering plate and counted money, I could never remember who gave what, and I had to do that. But there was one person I always wanted to ask what method she was using, because I can't remember how much it was, but it would be numbers like $42.37. And I always thought it would be really interesting to know she's clearly applying a percentage to something. Well, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I do
Either that or
comment.
trade.
Yeah.
You have these $29 and the $31 pledges. You say, all right, that's obviously some
Oh, yeah.
benchmark off something. That's not
Absolutely.
a random number.
And that was kind of interesting.
So it's cute.
Oh, we got 3 more minutes, I think. And anybody who wants to nap on the food time, they'd be my guest. You may have to beat me to it.
We hope it doesn't affect us.
You're right.
Well, I'm also the counter at our church, I'm one of the counters, and it's because we have it broken down by months. We have a cycle that we run through, so right now it's my cycle, and it's always amazing when I'm counting, because one person, it goes by the winning lottery numbers. So whatever the winning lottery numbers were on Saturday, that's what this one family pledges gifts for their tithe every Sunday.
Really?
And it is so interesting, because okay, 53, I guess that was one of the winning numbers this week. But it's so interesting. And it cracks me up, and I don't think
That's hysterical.
And they do it every month.
That's interesting.
Because I talk to the other countries, they're like, yeah, they do it for us too. I'm like, that is so cool.
Well,
Obviously not what they're winning at the, but just one of the numbers. Huh?
Exactly.
Interesting.
So I don't know if it's their 10% or not, but, or whatever they're doing, but it's like, really? 53 this week, 37 next week, 10 this week. It's like, this is kind of cool. How is your system?
you know, I have to tell you, oh, good, I do have to follow the fun script.
I have to say the comments are funny. I like them.
I love cartoons, and I'm in moving and changing email addresses and stuff. I sort of lost my subscription. I just resumed it recently. Anyway, I love these people. They're clear. I have no idea what their denominational affiliation is, but the Fellowship of Merry Christmas. They're one of their biggest sellers is a photograph, a picture of a laughing Jesus. Which I think is kind of neat.
With a smoking Jesus.
You know, I've never seen that.
They smoke and that doesn't hurt you.
Oh, let's see.
Virgin Mary smokes menthol lights.
Oh, that's fun.
Now, see, I have this whole theory about the favorite beverage of the 4 gospel writers.
Okay.
Yes, this started because I enjoy the Book of Mark. I don't know, someday I'm going to count how many words he uses the word
It's more straightforward.
Yeah, immediately. He's the short one. And I said one time, I said, Mark reminds me of the guy in the bar sipping a long neck something or other. Actually, probably not sipping, but anyway, taking healthy gulps up. The guy who says, I can't tell you about this guy, Jesus, he's just incredible. That, to me, is Mark. So I said, and somebody said, well, if Mark's a beer drinker, how about the others? I said, well, now let me see now. I think that Matthew is most definitely someone who appreciates single malt scotch.
I think you're right.
The gentleman drinker of the 4.
Yes.
Yes, and I always figured that Luke probably had a taste for bourbon.
Yeah,
Don't ask me why, but I think Luke is a bourbon guy.
it's a very doctor drink too.
Yeah, and when you got to John, I said, John doesn't drink, John's smoking something.
No, I think he drinks absinthe.
Oh, there's a possibility, I hadn't thought of that.
Yes.
My
That's
New
so I
Testament
think.
professor was not amused by that, but anyway. Typology for me.
He smokes clove cigarettes.
Is that what, oh gosh. Oh goodness, listen, if you can't have fun as a Christian, for heaven's sakes, what hope is there? I want to say we have to give witness to the fact that we know the kingdom of heaven is going to be the best fun we ever had.
I have helped people who are trying to smoke anonymously by telling them they come forward to heaven. Boy, it doesn't hurt them.
Yeah, that's good.
And she just smokes Marlboros and, you know, so on. I
Marlboro.
was there, I saw it.
No. The Marlboro, the new prospect of the Marlboro now.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
will our children be stewards? Now, I need to tell you, this is not a workshop with lots of answers. But it is a workshop in which, if you think up some good answers, I'll pass them on the next time I do this workshop. I got interested in children before 1996, before I went to work at the national office, in part because of the story that I do tell here in Nova. Was with a vestry group for a small church, and we were writing a vestry stewardship statement. And we started that exercise by asking people about their early memories of money as a gift or reward, and early memories of giving money. You know, their giving stories had to do with mite boxes and birthday songs, and as they told those stories, it was just very clear that they were really precious memories. So I said, gosh, I'm really enjoying listening to you tell these memories. I'm curious to know, what do your children do in this church? Well, it's just dead quiet. Now, in a small church, you usually have on your vestry the people who do really important stuff. And of course, we had on our vestry the woman who taught the children's Sunday school class. And they all looked at her and they said, well, gosh, you know, I mean, the kids, they leave after the gospel's been read. They come back to the worship service just in time to watch we've already taken up the offering. Well, I guess they must do it in Sunday school, don't they? So-and-so. And she went, well, there's never been an offering in children's Sunday school as long as I've been here. Which she hadn't grown up there. So I went, really? I said, so what you're telling me as a group of adults who have precious memories of Sunday school offerings in mite boxes and birthday offerings, that there is no opportunity for children in this church to bring an offering. They went, gosh, I guess not. I said, well, I think you should think about that. It was 2 or 3 months later, I saw the priest. And she said, I have to tell you about what's happened since you were there. First of all, the Sunday after this particular evening of the vestry, she noticed as the offering plate came forward that sitting on top, the ushers carrying the offering plate out was this blue box. And as it got closer, she could see that it clearly bore the influence of childish hands. And after the service was over, the Sunday school teacher vestry in the room said, let me tell you about the blue box. I talked to the children this morning about offering and told them that we will be having an offering in Sunday school, and so we decorated a blue box. And just as the children came upstairs, she handed the box to the usher and said, here, take this up with the offering. I thought, great. I see, that's the neat thing about a small church. You can sometimes just solve it. You know, you don't need committees and task forces and study groups. So a year or so later, I ran into her again, and I said, oh, I've been telling everybody about your blue box. She said, well, let me bring you up to speed again. For starters, they'd worn out a couple of blue boxes. And they had taken my advice to do in a quick and dirty financial report in their newsletter. Now, the quick and dirty financial report involves, let's see, expenses, plate and pledge offering, budget, actual for the current month, and the budget and actual for the year to date. Quick and dirty gives everybody a quick assessment of where you are. They had added an item under plate and pledge. They had added children's offering. So they were accounting for the children's offering separately so the children could see it. And also so the adults could too, but mostly the children. I said, that's brilliant. I mean, if you'd given me enough time, I might have thought of that, but I hadn't. The other thing that they had done was they had let the children pick an outreach project, something they were going to give money to. Now here was the important part about that. They did not give just the proceeds of the children's offering. The children picked the place, but the contribution came from the entire congregation. The children's offering didn't get designated to special projects. It came into the church along with everybody else's. And then everybody paid for all of the projects, including the one the children had paid for. Do you understand what I'm saying? And the kids got it. We are part of the whole, all of the time. Our offering is like everybody else's, and our work also gets supported by everybody else, which I thought was brilliant. So that was my introduction to thinking about children, and that was back about 1995, maybe, 5 or 6. Along about 2004, I read an article in Time about businesses who were courting children as customers. And the article was about large corporations, and I think 2 of the ones mentioned might have been Ford and Verizon, who were having focus groups for children as young as 7. And I was appalled that Ford Motor Company would be having focus groups that involve children as young as 7. I'm like, that's outrageous. Well, the logic is very sound. The earlier you create a customer, the more loyal they can become. And I thought, aha. Well, that was before I learned about M. And I thought, great, I figured it out. Our children are no longer a precious resource. They are just another class of consumer. It used to be that advertising agencies had maybe 1 or 2 people who might work on marketing to children, and it was to sell kids stuff. Now we have entire departments that may occupy 1 or 2 floors in major advertising agencies, and it's to sell all kinds of stuff to children of all sorts of ages. And a lot of that is due to a book written by, I want to say James Neal, it may not be his right name. He wrote a book about marketing to children, kids as consumers, back in the 80s, late 80s. He taught in the business program at Texas A&M. And the book basically outlined that it used to be the way you sold things to children was to convince mom it was a good idea for the child, and mom then convinced the child. What he was saying is that the better way to do that was to sell to the kid and let them nag until mom buys it. Now, I'm happy to say that in the late 90s, kind of a nag resistance began to develop. Well, I discovered there is a whole body of literature about people selling stuff to our kids. And I read some, and I became increasingly horrified and irked. Of course, by now, I had a granddaughter who was born in the year 2000, and she's getting older, and I just think she is the cutest thing ever. And the thought that she's on somebody's dartboard as a target customer or target market niche, I just found deeply distressing. So in 2006, we put on a conference called Will Our Children Be Stewards? And by then, a young man called me a year before that. His name was Nathan Duncan. His name is in here in the bibliography, and he wrote the book that I mentioned last night and today called Prodigal Sons and Material Girls, How Not to Be Your Child's ATM. Nathan was a financial manager and then a marketing person for Thriving Financial Services, highly respected Lutheran financial management firm. And he quit and wrote this book, and it is about the commercial culture's view of our children and some ways that parents can try to teach children some more important things about the value of money and how to use it. I suggested to you as a pretty interesting small group study for parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and any other friends and children who like to get a little more savvy. He writes most about teenagers in the book. They have some good ideas for beginning to raise not just money savvy, but money sensitive and children who do understand about the uses of money. It's a really good program. Anyway, Nathan and I got acquainted, and I said I want to do this conference, so he helped me plan it. He lives in Minneapolis. We had the conference in Minneapolis. It's the only time I ever wrote on the conference brochure, is it possible to have a conference about children and not invite them to come? So we had a couple families who drove out from Maryland and brought their kids. We had half a dozen children who came to the conference. We had hired Friends of the Groom, a drama troupe in Cincinnati, who were super, performed some really thought-provoking short bits for everyone, but also did some special work with the kids. So we had to design a children's track for this time. We got everybody together in the hotel there in Bloomington, Minnesota, and the first activity for the conference was to put everybody on the hotel shuttle and take them to the Mall of America for a field trip. I hope this anecdote is interesting for you, but it was kind of interesting. Nathan and I managed to get on a morning talk show on National Public Radio in Minnesota and answer questions about it. But even before that, somehow a piece of our conference publicity found its way to the Mall of America. And I get this call from the Vice President's secretary asking if they can meet with us. And in the course of the conversation, I figured out they think that there is this army of picketers coming to the Mall of America. And so I said, wait a minute. People are just, they're not going to be wearing anything or carrying anything. We're simply sending them to the Mall of America because it really is kind of a metaphor for the commercial culture. It's a compact place for them to visit. They'll have questions like to record which stores got their attention, what it was that they think got their attention. Was it color? Was it display? Was it smell? Was it whatever? And what they bought, if anything. So they calmed down at the Mall of America. I was thrilled. I thought the fact that they took us seriously and thought we were threatened was fabulous. It's probably one of the best events I ever did, in part because we did invite children, and they were just a grace-filled addition to the event. I'd also invited fellow board members from the Ecumenical Stewardship Center, and so we had a representative from the United Church of Canada, the Presbyterian Church of Canada, the ELCA here, the United Methodist Church in the U.S. Someone came from the Center for a New American Dream. So it was an interesting time. Now, did we come up with easy answers about what to do to assure our children will be stewards? I would say no gimmick, no revolutionary anything. So let me just offer a few thoughts. First of all, will our children be stewards? Not if we don't wake up and begin doing some really good teaching for our children. Our children are also receiving 5,000 messages a day telling them how to spend money. That you are what you wear, you are what you own, you are what you spend money on. We get them maybe for half an hour on Sunday morning. So making the time count is really important. And what we teach is extremely important. The culture is pervasive. Teaching children Christian values in a culture that says, what do you mean you don't have a phone, cell phone? I mean, Erin, my granddaughter, who's going to be 12 in a couple of weeks, was asking for a cell phone at the age of 8. Did she need one? No. Does she have one now? I think she might. I'm not sure. Kids are comparing notes about the things they purchased on Facebook. I just love Monday, whatever it is. The hot items. And we get maybe a useful 30 minutes, 40 if you're really lucky. And I would suggest that learning something about the values of the faith may be more important than being able to know what the different liturgical seasons are. Children's curriculum is really shy on some of this stuff. The other thing that played into all of my thought about this was I listened to a lot of people's tithing stories, and the majority of them began when I was a child. And my parents taught me to tithe. So one of the ways that we approach this is trying to do some guidance for children. It's one of the reasons I suggest Prodigal Sons and Material Girls. It's a good book study for parents to help parents be aware of the kinds of messages their children are receiving and some really easy clues. Kids nowadays are really savvy about advertising messages, much more than they were 10 years ago. They know somebody's trying to sell them something. And so if you're going to let your children park in front of the television set, you watch television with them. My best hope for a congregation is that it becomes a safe place for I used to say church is a safe place to be peculiar. And about the issue of children and consuming, parents need a safe place to be peculiar, where their efforts to make some good decisions about their children are supported someplace. And church is a place where that might happen. Involving children in giving projects is really important, and not just doing the Youth Sunday where they get to do the readings and pass the plates. But I love the way that the small church I mentioned involved children in a giving decision, how the church might reach out and exercise its ministry. I think middle school is probably an age where creating a giving club, where kids begin to establish goals for giving and how much they're going to give, and do it as a club. We have investment clubs for adults. How about a giving club for kids? I suggest that any child who has money in their pockets is old enough to be asked to contribute to church. A separate set of envelopes for children is a great idea. And you can either find some at theenvelopeservice.com, I think, the people from whom you purchase your offering envelopes, or you can hand the children a box of plain envelopes and a box of markers and ask them to create their own, with pictures that they like, or with stickers that they like, but let them have their own envelopes. My friend Maria Elliott, who is at Trinity in New Orleans, did a session with children in church about giving and envelopes, and the Sunday after Epiphany, she was going to be giving out the envelopes. So on Epiphany Sunday, so on Epiphany Sunday, she gathers the children together and says, does everybody know what's special about today? And Maria is thinking, it's Epiphany. It's the day when we celebrate, the wise men and so forth. And the kids said, yes, today we get our envelopes. That's what they thought was special about the day. And collecting those envelopes and seeing what the kids did with them moved her to write something about it in the Episcopal Network for Stewardship's newsletter. This has been, gosh, more than 10 years ago. There was a place on the envelopes for, I think it said, this week I shared I gave my thanks for God's gifts by doing whatever, or showed my love for Jesus' work. And kids would write such real things in there, playing the piano, or I give thanks for. The one that broke her heart was the child who wrote, knowing that my baby brother is no longer sick but is in heaven with Jesus. That just really wiped her out. I mean, children do such real things, but the kids loved having their own envelopes. That's one possibility. The other is, as I said, let them do a fundraiser project for a special deal. Kids can do all kinds of things, especially when they get a little older. I would suggest that anyone of any age who can write their name is entitled to a commitment card, to a pledge card. I would suggest that if you're going to offer envelopes and commitment cards to children, you need to have a session for parents about why you're doing this. And talk to parents about how to answer the question, why are they giving me this? And if parents don't want their children to have it, you don't get to give it to them. I'm sad for those parents, but that's okay. I did did a Sunday morning forum presentation about children and teaching children about money and how to begin to figure out what to do with it. And there was a woman there who said, well, my child doesn't, she has no need for money. So how old is she? Well, she's 8. She leaves in the morning to go to school, to a private school, and she has her lunch there, and she has her healthy snack with her. And I thought, okay, I hope she eats it. I'm wondering if she refrigerates the way she comes home. She has no need for money. I said, well, how are you 8 years old? 8 years old is, you kind of know what money is. This is old enough. I said, how are you teaching her how to deal with money? She said, oh, she's much too young to know that. And I thought, well, poor kid. She's too young at 8. When children begin to receive money, they're old enough to learn better. My friend Nathan, let me just say, he's listed here, his book and his website called ShareSaveSpend.com is in the bibliography here. And he's developed 1 or 2 resources that are really useful for children. He created a 3-part bank, and it's the Share, Save, Spend Bank. 3 columns, one says share, one says save, one says spend. And the mantra is, this is how we must teach children to to sort out their finances. First you share, then you save, then you spend. Financial institutions will say first you save, then you spend. The church says, no, first you share, then you save, then you spend. It's an interesting resource to have for kids. I think one of the other things we have to be aware of is the financial vernacular in which our children are growing up. Let me think now. Stephen and Michael are my two nephews. They're a junior and senior in high school. They were in middle school. And I gave them and my granddaughter share, save, spend banks for Christmas. And in the save and spend categories, into each of the columns, I put a $10 bill. In the share column, I put what we call a share check. It was a check that had the date and the pay to the order of left blank. I had filled in the amount, $10, and I had signed the check. And I clipped to it a note to be included with the check that said, to whom it may concern, please note that this contribution does not come from the writer of the check. It comes from, and I listed the child's name and address. Please send a thank you note to them, and do not put me on your mailing list. Well, of course, I got on the mailing list, but it was very important that the kids received the acknowledgement. Several days after Christmas, I was visiting my brother's house, and my sister-in-law Julie said, the boys really like the banks, but Stephen had a question about the check, and I'm thinking, oh, you mean that note I put in? No. Stephen didn't know what to do with the check. So what do you mean? I said, I know Stephen and Michael, they've made contributions to, I think, the Heifer Project at least before. How'd they do that? Well, we did it all online. They handed their dad or me the cash and we used a credit card. They never used a check. Now Stephen at the time, I think was in the 8th grade, he captained the quick recall team in his church, in his school. He's a smart kid. And this kid didn't know how to use a check. So the thing we need to be aware of, you have children in your church that will never use a check. And if you aren't looking at ways to do electronic giving, you might want to think about it. Because they will be more inclined to do that than they will to me to ever write you a check. However, as children, they probably get cash as an allowance and they can give you cash as an allowance. But just be aware that they will be largely checkless.
It's the Nathan in the Odyssey.
And let me see, I can't, the page number here won't necessarily work, but in terms of the Steward's Notebook, it is, the bibliography starts, and in the notebook it starts on page 32. And it's the first of the books about children and money for adult reading.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll go through a couple of these things and tell you the things I really like a lot. Because I didn't include anything with which I had not read it, looked at the website, or done whatever in the past 18 months, I think. I want to say something about, I don't know if this is still available. I'm looking at page 32 here. There is a children's stewardship curriculum that I worked on with Living the Good News, which was a division of Morehouse Publishing, which has now been purchased by the Church Publishing Group several years ago. We did a 4-week children's stewardship program, that curriculum, that had a series for preschool, grades 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and 5 and 6. Based on, and this is embarrassing, I will forget which 4 Bible stories we used. But there was a curriculum, there was a handout for children. I think the first story was the story of the Good Shepherd, because we worked with the Children's Formation Executive at the Episcopal Church Center. That's a wonderful story for children, and the idea that Jesus does watch over you and Jesus does keep you safe, and that was a nice lead-in to stewardship. There was also a parent guide that had some thoughts for the parents about how to talk about the lessons the children had had at church, and some things that you might do at home to underscore that. I'm always kind of sad that they don't include parent guides for a lot of children's curriculum. On your way home from church, what did you learn in Sunday school today? And they'll say, oh, I don't know, something about whatever. Does anybody else have children who never knew their Sunday school teachers' names? Or often were unclear about it?
But I taught Sunday school, and the kids couldn't remember who I was.
Oh, there you go, okay.
But,
Oh, good.
but
You're not the only one.
you were talking about that parent, like, I remember this was when I was in high school, when I taught Sunday school, because I went to church, my church in the first part, and then the second part was me. And I remember on the back of the flyer that went home with them, it had the parent-child link that they could do at home. And I told the kids, I said, okay, this is your homework for next Sunday. If you bring it back to me, I'll have something special for you.
That's
And so I always gave them like a little cross keychain if they brought it back. And then they got to put it on a chain, and then if they had all of them at the end of our Sunday school session, I gave them a donut.
Good for you.
I rewarded them. I mean, it's like, it showed me that their parents were taking an active role in what they were learning from me at Sunday school.
And I'm sure parents appreciated that. See, I'm a firm believer in strategic bribing.
Oh, yeah.
It works. I don't know if this is still available, but you might ask. And it would not be from the Morehouse Group. I'm sorry I didn't update this. It would be from CPG, Church Publishing Group.
Which one?
The very first one, the Children's Stewardship Curriculum. Actually, I'll call them up and see if they really want to redo it. Anyway, I've got several ideas that are in here that start on about page 27. I've talked about the children's offering. I've talked about the envelopes and commitment. And this honor every gift. If children give you a gift, you can track. They get statements just like adults. Now, I've had church treasurers who says, well, it'll cost more to send those than the kids give. I said, yes, chalk it up as an education expense. But you do honor the gift.
Right.
Doesn't matter. I think perhaps that you definitely insert a conversation about what is stewardship and what does that mean in terms of using your resources, your time, your talent, energy in a confirmation class is essential. And what the church norms are about that. We need to be clear about that and preparing people for confirmation. I've said in here, include the Christian education volunteers, team with them. I mean, let's be efficient about this. I've said read prodigal sons of material girls, think, share, save, spend. Oh, one way to make this a household activity is to have a share fair or an alternative gifts fair. I'm hopeful I can talk to the women's group that are putting one on in May City as we begin Advent, so that you can walk around and say, I mean, I really have told my kids I don't need anything else to dust. So I will tell you the places where if you will send a gift to my honor, I'll be thrilled to bits to get it. In our family, this is my family story. My brother's mother-in-law got in the habit several years ago of giving to her two daughters' families, making a contribution to the Heifer Project in their name. And she gave them a stuffed animal of, you know how Heifer Project works, so much money will buy a cow.
Right.
She would give them a stuffed animal representing the animal that supposedly the donation bought. She was so thrilled the year that she finally found a stuffed llama. Anyway, well, my mother thought that was a pretty cool idea. And so, several years ago, she said, I think we need to give something to the Heifer Project as a family. How about a water buffalo? Fine. Well, that was going to cost $250. Did I think that we could raise that? I'm like, Mom, you and I are both good for at least $50. We've got my brother, we've got my two sons' families. I mean, we can do more than that. Let's just see what happens. And so we decided we would do that, and I got to send out all the emails, and their church was having a share fair, or alternative gifts fair, I can't remember what they did it, and you could give your check to the Heifer Project representative. So my mother is going to give her checks to Stephen and Michael, her grandsons. Well, by now my granddaughter lives in Lexington, and they don't go to church. So I called up my heathen son and said, now please don't tell him I referred to him. He would be really offended and it would jeopardize our relationship. I should say my son the atheist, because we had a discussion about his religious preference. Anyway, and said, listen, here's the deal. My mother is giving her check to her grandchildren, and I want to give mine to my grandchild to take. So you don't have to go, but ask Melissa and Aaron to go to church on that Sunday with Ray and Julie and the boys, and they can do this. So the kids collected all the checks, went off on that Sunday, made the contribution to the Heifer Project. And on Christmas Day, before we started opening gifts, these 3 children stand up and they tell us what all we bought from the Heifer Project. Yes, we got a water buffalo. We had ducks and geese and rabbits and I don't know what all else. But we had a bunch of stuff that we felt really good about. Round of applause, you know, and then we opened our gifts to each other. I just thought that was too cool. So the next year, I'm thinking to myself, I hope we do this again. This is a really good project. But time went on and it went on and I didn't hear. So I finally called and talked to Stephen, the older of the 2 boys, and said, are we going to do that again? He said, well, Aunt Terry, Michael and I had another idea. Michael and I and our 2 friends, Josh and whatever, we have been saving our money. Now, this is 4 boys in middle school. We've been saving our money. Between the 4 of us, we have, I think it was $500. 4 kids in middle school who saved their money all year to do something meaningful at Christmas time. And we just thought, we'd give that to the Heifer Project, and we might, you know, ask our families if maybe they could, you know, make it grow to $1,000. We'd like to have $1,000. I'm thinking, that ought to be easy. My gosh, we have 4 well-meaning families here. And they've all got, I mean, in our family, Stephen and Michael got not only their 2 grandmothers, but me and my sister and my kids. So they got their $1,000. I mean, on Christmas Day, they told us all what they were doing and asked us to participate. Well, my mother had given me a $100 bill for my Christmas. I just handed it over. I mean, what else do you do? I mean, these kids are inspiring. So I talked to them about Kiva. Do you know about Kiva? Kiva is a website through which you can make loans to entrepreneurial efforts by individuals in the third world.
There's also one called Finca.
What?
There's also one called Finca. FINCA. Finca works specifically with women in developing nations and forming co-ops.
Yes.
So that it not only loans the money to them to start businesses, but then they form a co-op where they each contribute a certain percentage that then they can, then they have the co-op money that they can loan out to each other to grow their businesses, and then they pay the loans back to the co-op, and so it grows the community.
Well, anyway, the 4 guys went online, and this is what made me think that middle school is a great time to develop some giving groups. They went online and they picked some businesses and made loans through Kiva to folks. And I can't remember what they were for, but they were at one time able to tell me kind of what kind of loans they made. And Kiva at the time wouldn't let you take a loan any more than $25 to a single individual. I thought, this is fabulous. Great learning experience. And Stephen has turned into a significant interest in global poverty and what might be done about it. But that came out of the family involvement is what I really like, making some of this a family project. And I think the church, frankly, that initial gifts fair came in their church. We are a good place to nurture that kind of thing. So I offer you that suggestion. Create some vehicles that establish a family conversation about giving beyond the home.
The other thing is the effort project and the loans are very specific.
Yeah.
And so young people can see
Yes.
what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And that's part of it also.
Absolutely.
And there are lots of opportunities. You know, there's World Water, water.org. You know, right now for $25, you can help one family, which is usually somewhere between 4 and 12 people, have a well, clean drinking source of water. And they're focusing right now on the Horn of Africa.
You know, another website I learned about, a group I learned about back in January, met a woman who's working with a solar energy not-for-profit, and they do, you know, big projects for plants and so forth, but she figured out that the lack of light in homes was a significant issue.
It is.
And that the fires, in order to provide enough light, tended to cause small home fires and so forth. She's got a group of women in Africa that they call Solar Sisters, because they found a small solar unit that you set outside during the day, you bring it in at night, and you have light in that small home.
They've also, I spent 8 months last year in Africa, and they found that the fuel oil, that it's expensive, so a lot of families can't afford to use it. or can't afford to buy it. And if they do buy it, they can only afford to use it for a short amount of time. And so the statistics show, I mean, the real numbers are there, you can see them, but the statistics show that families that are in more rural areas lack electricity, have more health problems, and have more children because the lights go out, the natural lights go out, especially in Central Africa. The natural lights, unless you live in a savanna area, they go out at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night because it's a 12-hour cycle of light. And then you have an oil lamp for an hour or two, maybe, and then that goes out. And so then from 8 o'clock or a little later on at night until the sun comes up at 5:30, 6 o'clock, it's dark. There's nothing else to do. So crime happens, and babies get made, and children don't read, and children don't study. And so there's a program in Kenya this young man started that's solar lanterns. I'm working with a bunch of people in Rwanda trying to bring solar lighting there, and they have seen that the educational level increases because people are able to study, and people enjoy studying, and they want to learn, and so that enables them, and thus then that changes the economic status of the family as well. And so it's amazing how just a little resource like that, a solar lantern, it's phenomenal. I mean, they have so much sun, and it's so powerful that there's a company in southern Wisconsin that makes these. Now these are industrial-sized batteries, but they make these solar batteries that are about 2/3 the size of that table over there, and on a full charge, which takes so much solar power to do. In our country, it would probably take a couple of days, unless it was this Texas in August or something. But in most of the African countries, it takes like a day. And the battery itself, if it never sees another drop of sunlight until it's used up, can last 3 to 4 days.
Wow.
It's huge.
So it's a huge project, and that's what I'm working with, actually, with the Rwandan Development Committee and the president on bringing that in there and making that actually a percentage requirement of new buildings, so that because they have just so much. I mean, it's a resource that we speak about it here, but we're so bogged down in our politics and our big money industries and stuff to go into that. And so, but when you can look at governments and look at using that, and they realize that, and especially in Rwanda where I was, they realize that their people are the resources, and that if they don't enable their people, then and so they're making the internet available across the entire country. And in a mountainous country, it's not an easy feat. And they want to bring the solar lighting, and they're doing that through a stewardship process. I mean, it's not tithing, but it's a stewardship process, investing in the people for the future. And so it's amazing the opportunities that are out there. I think when you do something like the alternative gifts thing, I did that a couple of years ago because I wasn't back in the country until about a week before Christmas last year. But 2 years ago, I did that for my grandma. And I've given my grandma all sorts of stuff throughout my whole life, and all sorts of things that I know that, little kid handprints or whatever, things that have touched her heart. But I was so excited that I actually got the envelope right before Christmas because I thought it was going to be late. And I gave her that. I don't remember which project I donated to at the time, but and she cleared off all. She always puts all her cards up on her table when she gets them for her birthday or Christmas or whatever. And she cleared them all off, and she put just that one up there. So.
Which made you feel terrific.
Yeah.
See, and kids get it. They absolutely get it. I'm convinced there is a latent generosity in children that if we nurture that, our life with them as adults is much, much simpler. Much simpler. Stephen got invited by a doctor in their congregation this summer to go off and spend a week helping this cardiologist implant pacemakers. And his mother was really anxious about him going. he was going to go spend a week with his church youth group to do a mission project in Detroit, and then he had something else to do, and he was going to be gone most of the summer for some academic thing he was doing. And then she was so anxious about him going to Nicaragua. I said he's at greater physical risk in Detroit than he is in Nicaragua. But what was interesting was teaching him how to raise the money. It was going to take $1,500. He had a little over $1,000 in savings. He was willing to exhaust that to send it. And I said, you don't understand. To get to help you do this is an honor and a delight. So, funny thing, my mother and my sister and myself gave him enough money to cover Hamlet. I said, now write your other two grandparents and tell them you got half the money and see what happens. His parents wanted to make sure he paid part of it, but to encourage children in that kind of ways. He's 18 now. He's a senior in high school, but to encourage them in those kinds of things is really important.
It offers two opportunities too. I've done a lot of short-term mission work, especially with youth groups, but then also the months that I spent in Africa last year. And when you do a letter campaign to encourage support for what you're doing, you're encouraging a prayer focus though too.
Yes.
Because you're not. I mean, it's for people who don't have an opportunity to do that because they have families, because they're, a year younger than high school and they can't go on the trip because they're junior high, or, there are age restrictions for things like that sometimes, or because, they're old now, or whatever. I mean, it gives them an opportunity to feel a part of something.
Yes.
And I know one of the things I did for my trip last year in my letter campaign writing and stuff, I asked people to prayerfully support my trip. And in that prayerful support, they felt that they were called to a financial contribution, that they could submit it, and there was various ways, and they could send it to this address and blah, blah, blah. And then I also went ahead and included prayer cards. And my initials happen to be TLC. So I asked people to be TLC prayer warriors. And because my mission there was to work with child-headed families primarily, and children who were in slums on scholarship, and to schools and that sponsored children, mine was there to teach, learn, and care for the people of Eastern Africa. And so my close family and friends know that my initials are that way. And that's how I addressed the card. I said, please support, and I put my whole name. And then I said, and help me, and then I put the letters down this way and went, teach, learn, and care for. And then I had a few scriptural references. And I asked people to pray those with me while I was there. And so it gave people a physical thing that they could look at, that they could take someplace, that they could do whatever. But it also gave them the opportunity to be a part of something. And so I sent back reports, and I unfortunately, upon landing, lost all of my pictures through theft. Then I sent back reports, and people got to hear about what I was doing and what was going on and that kind of stuff. And so it gives people an opportunity to be a part of something. And all of the kids I've ever gone on short-term missions with, you can see the level of maturity and especially spiritual maturity, but maturity just change in them from day to day, even if you're only gone for 3 days. You can see it's just phenomenal, and their perspective and what they care about, and how they turn around. And I know in our schools today we have a huge problem with bullying, and it's amazing to me to see how when we cultivate these things, like stewardship and prayer life and tithing, when you look at those things and you think about how that makes us look outside ourselves, how that turns around and manifests in not falling in with the crowd that's being the mean people at school, and being willing to stand up. And it's amazing how it transforms communities.
Yes, it does. So that's why we do it. I want to say a word about adults. Almost all formation takes place at home. One of the things you may have to consider is helping adults acquire mastery over their own finances. You can't teach your children to do other things. I say the reason children aren't learning how to manage finances is because a lot of parents didn't learn it anyway. So let me just say a brief word about financial counseling ministry. There are several really good ones available. Crown Financial Ministry is probably the oldest. Crown Financial Ministry, or Crown Ministries. You can Google these and find out. Crown is probably the oldest. It has a slightly more fundamentalist isn't the word I want to use here. Slightly more theologically conservative perspective than some of the others, but it's very good. It's a 12-week small group program that tends to be very biblically based, and it's worked really well in some congregations that I know. The other one is Good Sense Ministries. It's they've just revised it. I haven't seen the newer materials, but it's put together by Willow Creek Community Church. Here on the edge of Chicago, Willow Creek. They had an absolute turnkey kit you could purchase that had the videos and the script and the whole 9 yards. So check on the updated financial ministry that Willow Creek has done. It'll work for some other congregations. Small congregations tend to look at the $300 and some odd price tag on purchasing the kit, saying no thanks. But it'll work for some places. Another very popular one, especially that people in the South are familiar with, is Dave Ramsey. Everybody here heard of Dave Ramsey? Dave Ramsey and the Financial Peace University.
Say it again.
Financial Peace University. And I don't know whether it's Rams, I can't remember if it's Ram, I think it's R-A-M-S-E-Y as opposed to R-A-M-S-A-Y, but you can check on that.
Sure.
There are some very simple stuff. I put together a very simple 4-session workshop based on something that a United Church layman had done using a small book. So consider the fact that you, in order to do some good work with children, you may have to help some parents get their finances sorted out. An interesting little book that is the basis for the thing that we put together comes from 3rules.org, THREERULES.org. It's a very simple little book that costs about $5 or $6 that helps people answer some questions, points up some of the flaws you make, and help begin to figure out how to get out. But you may have to do that. Children whose parents are heavily in line up to their eyeballs. Parents may need some help. Those are the best of the suggestions that I have about children in general. On page 31, 10 things you can do to get youth involved in stewardship. Teenagers begin to be receptive to how to manage your money items and how to manage your time. They tend to be way overcommitted to more activities than they can possibly do, and they don't get enough sleep. The statistic at the bottom of this page that children and youth 8 to 21 spend $172 billion a year. This is at least 5 years old. It's much higher now. But they spend approximately 17 hours a week online and spend $22 billion a year online. That, I'm sure, is more than that. So let me just kind of run down some of the resources. Boy, this is an awful time to do a workshop, baby. Thinking that would be really nice. Maybe our children will be stewards if we did it with kindergarten math. Let me say a word or two about some of these resources. There are lots more. But the books about children and money for adult reading. I want to take a look. I've got Nathan here, How to Make Money Make Sense to Children, which is an interesting book. The third item listed there, Eugene Roque Partain's book, Growing Up Generous, Engaging Youth in Living, in Giving and Serving. There's something called the Serve Institute, which is based in, I want to say Minneapolis. It's done a fair amount of research. You might find there even more books that they've done. But this Growing Up Generous, Engaging Youth in Giving and Serving is where I got some of my best ideas about how to approach youth. And it's a pretty simple paperback book too. available from the Alvin Institute. I want to say a word about some of the books to read with children. I haven't done a cruise through Barnes & Noble recently to look at some of the books that are available, but I will say a word about the first book, The Table Where Rich People Sit. Anybody familiar with this book? It's a great book. I did a weekend one time for a congregation about families and money issues. And this was the book that just captured every parent's attention. And it is a book to read with a family. The story is about a young girl, Native American, who was called a family meeting because she says she wants to make it very clear to her parents that they need to get better jobs because they don't make enough money. I mean, if they not figured out that she and her brother are the poorest kids in the school, they wear rented clothes, they got this rattle trap truck, but her parents like working, they pan for gold and do work outside. They like working outside. And she just thinks that they're not responsible. So she convenes this meeting and her parents and she says, well, for example, this table where we're sitting was built out of some lumber that somebody was throwing away and my dad built, that my dad made it. But we're sitting here and we've got my mother's good blue plate and it's got some great ginger cookies on it or whatever they are, to have this meeting. So the meeting begins, and the parents don't argue with her. They say, well, that's an interesting idea. Let's just see how rich we are. Let's count up how rich we are. And they begin by saying, well, let's see. We get to work outside where we can feel the sun and feel the breeze. And how much is that worth to us? And they decide that's worth a few $1,000s. And then, let me think now. They think about the fact that their father can do all these kinds of bird calls. I mean, he can mimic the night birds and the day birds. And what's that worth? Well, that's worth maybe another $5,000. And mother has some skill. And she talks about the fact that one of the things they can do when they're outside is you can watch a cactus bloom and the particular color it is, and it may never be that color again. And then mother says, well, and how much is Mountain Girl worth to us? Now, that's the girl, but that's not her real name, but they call her Mountain Girl because her parents decided that they wanted, when she was born, for her to have her first sight be of a mountain, and they picked a mountain, and that's where she was born. And I think the brother says, well, you know, she's not worth much, but, you know, and the parents say, no, they decided that she's probably worth $1 million. And then they asked about Ocean Boy, that's the younger brother. See, they decided that since she had a view of the mountain, they would give him a different first view, so they found an ocean place for him to be born. Well, they decided he's probably worth $1 million too, and so then they kind of figure, the other two, the parents are also worth $1 million each. So by the time they finish counting all this up, they figure that they have riches of like $4,060,000. And that's a lot. And she says in this, she says, and we haven't even started to count the cash. And then they decide that maybe cash doesn't have a place on the list that she's making. And so the story ends with her saying, so our meeting's over and I'm sitting here and I've decided to call this the table where rich people sit. Interesting story. A wonderful engagement for parents. I'm not so sure, I think it will touch more adults than it will children. To say, what are the things that your children, that your family is valuing about itself as a family? Wonderful, wonderful book. If you're turning 10 now at St. Albans in Bay City, the rector, or the pastor, as I call him, is going to give you a copy of this book. The author, Bert Baylor, has got some other interesting books too for children. One of my other favorites is Everybody Needs a Rock.
Oh, I love that one.
Do you?
Everybody needs a rock.
Yes. Well, that you get when you're 7 in our church. But I'm writing in the front, the Lord is my rock, my salvation, from the Psalm. I've also got, I'm in charge of celebrations. This is a little girl. People say, gosh, you live out here where there's like, you live out here and there's no kids or stuff. How do you keep yourself busy? And she says, are they kidding? I'm in charge of celebrations, and she lists all the celebrations she has created. There was the day that she saw a coyote, and the two of them just sort of looked at each other for a long time. And so someday in the year is Coyote Day. She has a rainbow. And my other favorite one is by the same author, is The Way to Greet a Day, The Way to Start a Day. And it really draws on the Native American tradition of going out, greet the sun, greet the day. Anyway, but The Table Where Rich People Sit is a wonderful book to have in your library. And to have, if you're going to do an adult session, it's a nice way to start it off. To say, let's talk about how we, as a congregation of faithful people, can help one another nurture this kind of understanding of values in our families. The rest of them are Berenstain Bears, really popular with preschool kids, and there's some pretty good books. Arthur's Pet Business. The Giveaway. Money Sense for Kids. I put in Growing Money and a Complete Investing Guide for Kids. That may be out of date too, in the light of 2008. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Little Critter. Yeah, well here's Little Critter's Just a Piggy Bank. So there are lots of books for sitting these younger kids that really can provoke some good conversations. I mentioned the Money Savvy Generation. They have a 4-section piggy bank. Where they add an invest section to the piggy bank. These things are beginning to grow exponentially, but here are some if you're looking for some resources. And then the fun sites for kids. Some of them are really almost too easy. There's one of the ones for teens. I hope zillions.org is still there. Consumer Reports stopped adding to it. And just for fun, I encourage you to have adults go to the Global Rich List. You type in your salary and you find out where you place globally. I'm trying to think. The salary I was paid on the national staff of the Episcopal Church put me like number 4 million, whatever, in the Global Rich List. I was astonished. And people say, yes, but a lot of that's the third world. And the cost of living here is higher. And I'm like, yes, but isn't it interesting to know how do we rank in terms of percentages? Okay, that's what I have in the way of formal presentation on the topic of Will Our Children Be Stewards. I'm open to questions, comments, discussions, and thievable ideas. That may be really helpful.
Hello, this is Dr. Marks. Hello, this is Dr. Marks.
I like your idea of decorating envelopes because we have one family in our church. They're the only kids in our congregation, and it's a family of 6 kids. And they're the unruliest kids ever.
Really?
But Dr. Joyce bought in coloring books and crayons one Sunday, and they're now the most mellowest group I've ever met.
Wow.
So I'm thinking them decorating envelopes where they could participate in tithing would be fantastic.
Now, we gave envelopes to the kids at Resurrection. I'll never forget the day the kid came in and needed another envelope for his offering because his tooth had come out during Sunday school and he put in his offering envelope to take home for the tooth fairy. So he needed another envelope. I mean, you really do have to be prepared for some whimsy here. That was the time that I noticed that the young man, the little boy who came with the guy who was his big brother, the big brothers, that kid always had a dollar to put in the mouth. And I'm sure it came from his big brother. But that was too cool. But part of what this man was teaching us about was that this is what we do when we come to church. Make sure we have nothing.
When I was a late teen and first in my 20s and stuff, we, our children's program at my home church in northern Michigan, we always had like mini church. We call it kids church. And we would come in and we would sing a song, and it was usually a motion song like Father Abraham or something, where you get to move your arms and legs, and so it got the wiggles out, and kids would sit down and that kind of stuff. And then we would pass around a little woven basket as an offering plates, and kids would put in whatever they had, quarters or dimes or whatever, dollars, whatever. And then we said a very simple prayer, and we always held it up to our little table altar. Sometimes it was just the windowsill, just depending on how it was set up. And we would just fold it up and make the sign of the cross and say, God who gives us everything, bless these gifts your children bring. And then once a month, they would take all the money and they would bring it upstairs. And a little kid would walk it down the aisle with the offering plate and then put it on the altar. And then it would be blessed and it would go in. And I'm sure it was counted differently and separately and, whatever. But it was all together. And so another thing, just, like giving but not necessarily tithing. We always had a wagon at the back of the church that we used for our pantry collections. And then a child was the one that wheeled it up the aisle to the front of the church.
You remind me of several things. First of all, my friend that I talked about, the Blue Box, they did have children bringing the offering up. Great idea to bring the children's offering up. And my friend Michael, when he and his wife went shopping, the first item that went in the grocery cart was the item for the food basket. And the kids got to pick what was the first item to go in. There are ways to just incorporate children into doing.
And you can do that 2 different ways too. Like when you do grocery store shopping, if you're picking up items for a food pantry, if you have a choice between this and that as far as 2 different types of cereal, or whether you buy Pampers or Huggies, pay attention to what the companies are doing too. If General Mills, as opposed to Kellogg's, is giving a percentage to food pantries as well, by General Mills, you're giving twice.
Oh, that's interesting.
If Pampers is, for every box of Pampers that's donated, a child in a third world, which I hate that term, I use developing nation, but in a developing nation country gets a vaccination, buy Pampers. And you can teach about savings at the same time. We go through grocery store coupons, the ones that come in your Sunday paper or whatever, and we cut out the ones, we probably, in our coupon book, we probably have more coupons for things that we intend to buy to give away than we do for groceries that we keep at home. Because half the time I buy groceries at home, I don't buy the name brands for myself. But if I can save money and support the giving that corporation is doing, then I do it twice, and it's a way of teaching smart shopping and attentive shopping too, knowing that so that you support a company that is supporting something that you support.
I want to say a word about funding mission trips that teenagers go on. The whole congregation funds the mission trip. You can have a fundraiser, and the kids can take a big part of that, but I know places where the kids have raised all the money to fund their own mission trip. We don't do that. They are members of the congregation. The trip is a ministry of the entire congregation, and so the entire congregation plays a role in funding it.
What we usually do is have a dinner dance or something
Oh, really?
that
That's great.
is not dedicated, but
Yeah.
it's in our budget. The mission trip is in our budget. So is the dinner dance, and usually they're about the same. But sometimes we make a profit out of the dinner dance. We don't use it all for the mission trip. And sometimes it goes the other way. But it's sort of become a tradition that it is part of
I
the
like
parish
that.
budget.
That's
Where we have a
everything.
special party to raise money
I
that
love that.
helps fund it.
I had a former bishop of Lexington, didn't like, but he used to say, he didn't like fundraisers where the congregation asked the world at large to pay for things they weren't willing to pay for. But I'm a big believer in projects that involve, let me think now, use of time, talent, fellowship, evangelism, because you're inviting people into the church that turn a profit. I'm a big believer in those. But I have a story about my friend Murky, good friend. He came to St. Peter's Church in Paris, Kentucky. He'd spent 8 years as a missionary in Kenya. And one of the first, in Paris, Kentucky, it's about 12 miles north of Lexington. You go out Paris Pike, where they have the stone fences and the horse farms and all this kind of stuff. Bourbon County, Kentucky. And it's a congregation that has a few prosperous folks in it. Anyway, they were getting ready to have a rummage sale, and Corky said to him, he said, well, oh great, what are you going to do with the money? And they went, well, you know, use it. He said, well, for what? Well, you know, to pay operating expenses. He said, oh, well then I can't let you have that. I can't let you do that. He said, what do you mean? He said, look, you're a bunch of rich people. You're getting ready to sell your junk to poor people and keep the money. That's sinful. I can't let you do that. The only way you can get a rummage sale is if you give the money back to the poor people. So they had the rummage sale and they gave the money to the Bourbon County Food Pantry. It's a very healthy thing to make them do.
We do, another thing we do is World Hunger. We do a 30-hour famine. And it's an awesome youth event. And from the time they show up until the time they leave, well, we usually close it with actually having lunch. So the famine ends at like 10 o'clock in the morning. But for 30 hours, they don't eat anything. There's beverages and stuff, and of course there's exceptions for medical conditions, but they don't eat anything. And they do all sorts of things. I mean, they play games and just have kind of some fun. But one of the things that we always do in the morning is we always have a scavenger hunt. And so we incorporate the neighborhood, and they have a paper and it asks them certain questions, and they have to go up to people's houses and ask them for these items. And so, and most of the time it entails explaining what they're doing and where they're coming from. So it puts the church's name out there, it puts the famine concept out there, and then they're collecting items, and then they take all of those items and we go to, there's several in the area back home, but we go to a particular food pantry and bring them, and we always kind of rotate and have a different one each year, unless one's causing and one's stating a great shortage or whatever and stuff. And another thing that we often do is then have a different time and day where we simply go when they get lots of wholesale stuff sent to them and just simply help unpack. And so the kids see what's there and what they're stocking, and or the day that they have bags that get packed or something like that. So they have that experience, that volunteering experience. They also have that minor bit of evangelizing, because it's a foreign concept in a lot of ways to a lot of people, but especially Episcopalians, to kind of be, you know, I mean, it's not a comfortable thing necessarily, so.
I'm going to just summarize really quickly. We've got enough time that I always figure if you can let people out 3 or 4 minutes early, that's not bad. Basically, pay attention to children. Pay attention to the culture in which they live, the kinds of messages they're receiving, and get some clarity about the message we want them to receive. And I would say it's the same one we want them to be absorbing as adults, namely that everything that we have is a gift from God. And a part of our relationship with God is to give some back. And that a part of our relationship with God is to heed those 2 admonitions that Jesus left us with. You know, love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And the second is likely to love your neighbor as yourself, which means caring for those who do not have all the things that they might need. That's what we're trying to teach children. The most important concept in the heart of sale is that everything you have is a gift from God, and that we are called to respond to those gifts. I think that my friend Nathan has, when it comes to money, he has a wonderful statement. He says the choices we make about the money we have can change the world. And that's the other thing I think that we want everyone to understand. But children, they kind of get it. They absolutely do. Even if it's in a small way. And they will engage in projects in their own church, in the neighborhood that surrounds them. I like the mission trips that are glossy trips someplace. You get people who are converted on those, but I think you need to mix them up with some trips closer to home. That all the world's needs are not exotic places. Some of them are close by, to be responsive to those. And to teach children that they do indeed have within them the power to do something good. That's not an age-determined thing. The 10-year-old little girl who decided that she heard about children someplace in the world who had no shoes, and so she asked all of her little friends to bring a pair of shoes to her birthday, and they sent them away. Children have an inherent generosity that we need to be aware of and nurture. I hope that answers some questions. Thank you, Thelma, for some really good ideas. And if you come up with a good idea that works really well, that parents and children like, and that you think bears fruit, I want to hear about it. You've got my email address, tell me so we can pass it on. Our children do live in a difficult world, and the messages are out there that are not very helpful or very helpful. So we have to counteract those. That's all I got. And we're like 4 minutes over. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.